The glass was already tilting before she reached his table. She had timed it. 3 steps from the counter. The slight angle of the tray, the way the condensation on the bottom of the glass would do most of the work if she simply let her left foot catch the edge of the rubber mat near his chair. She had practiced the fall without falling, leaned into it, made it look like the kind of stumble that happens to tired women at 2 in the morning when the soles of their shoes have worn smooth and the shift has gone 4 hours too long. The glass hit the edge of the table. Ice water spread in a cold, quiet arc. And in the half-second, while his shoulders tensed and his security detail started moving and every other person in the diner glanced over, she was close enough. Close enough that when she reached out one hand to catch herself against his jacket, her face was 6 inches from his ear. She said 4 words. "Don't get in that car." She straightened, dabbed at the water with her cloth, apologized to the table in Korean, so natural it carried no accent at all, moved away before anyone could decide whether something had happened. Behind her, Kang Seo-jun had not moved. If you just felt that pull in your chest, that need to know what comes next, you're already where this story wants you. Like this video, subscribe, and stay with us. We're only getting started. Gabriella Adeyemi had been in Seoul for 2 years and 3 months before anyone important noticed her. This was, she had learned, the only currency a woman like her could spend in a city that did not know what to do with her. She was too dark to be easily placed, too fluent in Korean to be easily dismissed, too observant to be comfortable and too careful to let that discomfort show. The diner at the corner of Itaewon-dero and a narrow street that had no official name was open from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. and served exactly the kind of people who did not want to be seen eating. Politicians, lawyers who handled things that didn't go to court, men in expensive cars who came in alone, ate alone, left alone. She had started noticing the pattern 7 months ago. Not immediately. Not all at once. It began as the kind of thing you file without knowing you're filing it. A face you've seen before somewhere. A phone that rings at a certain time and gets answered in a certain way. A look exchanged between a man and the driver, waiting outside that carries more information than any words should. She was good at the background, at collecting the room without appearing to watch it. It was a skill she'd had as a child in Lagos, and sharpened in London, and brought finally to Seoul, where it had kept her safe and invisible and, until now, entirely unremarkable. The first time she'd seen the pattern complete itself was with a man named Choi Byung-soo. He was a city councilman who came in every other Tuesday, ordered the same thing, black coffee, the mushroom rice dish, and a glass of water he never finished. Received a call on a phone that was not his regular phone at precisely 12:45 a.m. Exchanged a look with his driver through the window. Left. 3 days later, Choi Byung-soo was not in the news. Not in anything. His office gave no statements. His family was unreachable. A man who had been loudly present in Seoul's political circles for 11 years simply stopped. She might have filed it as coincidence, except it happened again. A property developer. A man she recognized from a photograph as a mid-level figure in one of the southern crime families. A Korean-Nigerian businessman who came in twice, nervous both times, and on the second visit received the phone call and left in the car. He was the one she had been looking for. His name was Marcus Adeyemi, her brother. 29 years old, Lagos-born, Seoul resident for 3 years. He had been doing something he wouldn't fully explain to her, but had hinted at in careful language that told her he was close to something that mattered. He had said, 6 weeks before he disappeared, "There's a quiet kind of danger here, Gabby, the kind that doesn't announce itself." He had been right. She had gone to the police once. They had taken a report. Nothing came of it. She had gone to the Nigerian consulate. They had expressed concern. Nothing came of it. She had, in the absence of any institutional help, gone back to the only thing she had: her notebook, her memory, her invisibility, and the diner where the powerful ate their secrets in the dark. She had been waiting 7 months for someone important enough to matter to walk in. When Kang Seo-jun came through the door at 1:43 a.m. on a Thursday in October, she knew within 4 minutes who he was. Not because she'd heard the stories, though she'd heard them, or not because his security detail took up 2 additional tables and made every other customer suddenly very interested in their phones. She knew him because she'd seen his face in a photograph that Marcus had sent her in a message with no caption, just the image, just a face, just the kind of silence that meant, "This matters. Keep this." She'd kept it, and she'd spent the next 90 minutes watching him very carefully. He ate the way powerful men ate when they were used to people watching them, with a stillness that was itself a performance, a controlled indifference to the room that was actually its own kind of surveillance. He drank his tea. He read something on his phone. He did not speak to his security, except once, a single quiet word in a direction that was enough to send one of them outside to check the street. As at 2:37 a.m., a server she didn't recognize came through the back. Gabriella noticed this because she knew every server on the overnight shift. She had memorized them the way she memorized everything about the diner. The small inconsistencies, the things that only registered if you were paying attention. The man who'd come through the back was wearing the right color apron, but it didn't fit the way the aprons fit when they were issued from the diner's own supply room. He was carrying a tray. He went toward the bar, not toward the kitchen. She watched him stop near the window, watched him exchange a look with someone outside. She looked outside. There was a black car she hadn't seen before parked across the street. The driver's window was cracked open. Someone was watching the diner. The phone on Kang Seo-jun's table buzzed. He glanced at it, began to reach for his jacket. She picked up her tray, calculated 3 steps, 1 rubber mat, the angle of the glass, and went. The water had already soaked through the tablecloth by the time she reached the counter and kept moving without looking back. Her hands were steady. She had made them steady because hands gave things away when faces didn't. Behind her she heard his security detail rustling. She heard the silence that followed. She did not hear footsteps leaving. She was refilling the salt shakers at the end of the counter when his voice came from directly behind her. "You work the overnight shift." She turned. He was standing closer than anyone in his position usually stood to someone in hers. Not aggressive, not invading, just measuring. His face up close was harder than it appeared in photographs. Not cruel or precise. The face of a man who had learned to make all his decisions correctly and had paid some private cost for it that sat around his eyes. She met his gaze without flinching. "I do." "How long?" 2 years. He looked at her for a moment. Then, "What did you mean?" Not a question. She noticed that. He didn't ask questions the way people asked when they wanted answers. He asked the way people did when they already had a partial answer and were deciding whether she was worth the rest of it. "I meant what I said," she told him. "How do you know what car I was going to get in? There's a man at the bar in an apron that doesn't belong to this diner. The car across the street has been parked there since 2:25. The driver is watching the entrance, not the street." A pause. Very small. His eyes didn't move off her face. "Why would you tell me that?" She said nothing. Let the silence sit. Let him figure out that the absence of answer was itself an answer, that she had her own reasons, and they were real, and she wasn't going to hand them over for nothing. He studied her for another moment. Then he said, "Get your things. I'm in the middle of a shift. I'll have someone cover your shift. That's not how this works. It is now." He turned, spoke quietly to one of his security. She watched money change hands, a discreet gesture, a folded envelope given to someone who was already reaching for a phone, presumably to handle the logistics of replacing a late-night diner server. Then he turned back to her and waited. She untied her apron slowly, folded it neatly, placed it on the counter. She went to the back to get her jacket and her bag. And as she picked up her bag, she also made sure the small notebook inside it was in the inner pocket where it always was. Then she went back out and walked toward the door without waiting for instruction. She heard his footsteps behind her. Measured, even. As she passed the bar, she saw the man in the wrong apron watching her. His eyes were careful in the way that meant he was deciding something. She kept moving, kept her pace unchanged, pushed through the door into the cold Seoul night, and stopped on the pavement to let Kang Seo-jun's security team reform around them, which they did with the efficiency of people who'd done it 10,000 times. The black car across the street was gone. She noticed the moment Seo-jun noticed it too, a fraction of stillness, barely perceptible, in his movement toward his own vehicle. But then he was moving again, and she was being guided into the back of a different car that had appeared from somewhere, and the door closed with the soft, certain click of something expensive and armored. They drove for 4 minutes in silence. Then he said, without looking at her, "Start from the beginning." She told him about the pattern, not about Marcus, not yet. She told him about Choi Byung-soo and the property developer and 3 others, naming the signals, the replacement phone, the driver's window, the fake staff. She spoke clearly and without performance, the way you spoke when you understood that embellishment was its own kind of weakness. He listened with his profile to her, watching the street outside. When she finished, he said, "You've been tracking this for 7 months. "Yes, in a diner. People don't guard their behavior in front of service workers. It's useful." He glanced at her then, the first time he'd looked directly at her since they'd gotten in the car. There was something in the assessment, not dismissal, not the particular kind of condescension she'd learned to expect in rooms where she was the only person who looked like her, but something that felt more like recalibration, like a man quietly adjusting an assumption. "Who else knows?" he said. "No one." Why? Because the people who could do something about it are either involved or wouldn't believe me. And the people who would believe me don't have the power to do anything. Until now. Until now, she agreed. She kept her voice even as she said it. To let it land and sit without pressing it. He said nothing for a long moment. The city moved past the windows, the neon and the scaffolding, and the late-night delivery drivers threading their motorbikes through traffic, as if speed were the only language Seoul understood. "You're Nigerian," he said. "Yes." "You speak Korean without an accent." "Almost without an accent." He almost smiled. "Almost. Why are you here, in Seoul?" "I followed someone here," she said. And then, because she was good at knowing when partial honesty opened more doors than full silence, she added, "Someone who needed me to keep track of things they couldn't keep track of themselves." He looked at her again. She looked back. The car slowed to a stop in front of a building that had no sign, only a door and a security camera, and the kind of quiet that cost money. "Don't come inside," he said. The next 6 hours were the strangest of her time in Seoul, not because of the building, which was spare and sharp and contained the kind of men who looked at her with the specific neutrality of people who had been told to be professional about it. Not because of Seo-jun himself, who moved through the space with the ease of someone completely at home in it. Strange because of what happened when she showed him the notebook. She had not planned to show him the notebook. She had planned to give him the pattern and withhold the personal connection for as long as it was useful. But he had spread a set of photographs across a table. Photographs that included 2 of the names she'd already mentioned, and 3 she hadn't, and one that made her stomach go very still. And he'd said, "Oh, tell me which ones you've seen." And she had pointed to 5 of the 7. And when she got to the 3rd one, he'd watched her pause. "You recognize that one differently," he said. She didn't lie. "Yes." "How?" She took the notebook from her inner pocket and placed it on the table. He looked at it for a moment, then at her. Then he opened it. She watched him read, watched his face process the months of documentation, dates, times, car descriptions, phone behaviors, staff anomalies. He was a fast reader and he read everything. And somewhere around the 6th page, his jaw set, and he turned back to a page he'd already read and reread something. She knew which page. She knew because she'd written Marcus's name on it, the only name in the notebook written in English and underlined once. "Marcus Adeyemi," he said. "My brother." Silence. He looked up. "He's been missing for 7 months," she said. "He was the one who found the pattern first. He passed it to me before he disappeared." Seo-jun placed the notebook on the table with a care that was itself a response. He stood very still for a moment. Not the stillness of performance, but the kind that came from processing something that had changed the shape of a situation. "The network," he said slowly. "You think it's the same one." "I think it's the only one," she said, "and I think your driver tonight was connected to it." He looked at her for a long time. She let him. This was the moment, she knew it, where he either used her or dismissed her, and she had done everything she could to make using her the more logical choice. "You'll need somewhere to stay," he said finally. "I have somewhere. Somewhere they don't know about." The precision of the word they landed on her like cold water. She had been careful for 7 months, but the man in the wrong apron had watched her leave. She thought about her apartment, the route she walked every morning, the cafe where she spent her afternoons with her laptop and her translated Korean legal documents. "Somewhere they don't know about," she repeated, and this time it wasn't disagreement. It was acknowledgement. He gave her one of the rooms in the upper floor of the building. It had a window that faced an internal courtyard and a bathroom with a clean towel still in its original fold. She stood in the middle of it with her bag on her shoulder and her notebook back in its inner pocket, and thought about Marcus, about the photograph he'd sent. No caption, just a face, and understood for the first time in 7 months that she was no longer doing this alone. She was not sure yet if that made it more dangerous or less. It made it different. That was certain. She put her bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, listened to the sounds of the building, muffled voices, a phone ringing somewhere, the specific pressure of a controlled and watchful space. She did not sleep for a long time. In the morning, which arrived as a grey and careful thing, she learned the first thing about Kang Seo-jun that was not public knowledge. She found him in the room they'd used the night before, alone, no security inside, only the distant presence of them at the edges. And he was sitting in front of the spread of photographs, not doing anything. Just looking at them. His jacket was gone, or his shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow. In the daylight, he looked younger than he had under the diner's fluorescent lights, and more tired. and there was something in the set of his shoulders that was not the architecture of a man performing authority, but the architecture of a man carrying something without anyone to set it down with. He heard her before she said anything. Looked up. "Tea's in the kitchen," he said, and turned back to the photographs. She made tea. She brought 2 cups. She placed one on the table near him, not beside him, slightly away, so the decision to reach for it was his, and sat across the table with her own. He reached for it 6 minutes later. She didn't mark the moment. She didn't make it mean anything out loud, but she catalogued it the way she catalogued everything, quietly, precisely, without showing her hand. "I had someone check on your driver," he said. "And?" "He's been with me 4 years. Clean record. But 3 months ago, he started a new account at a bank he didn't use before. Small deposits, irregular. The kind of irregular that's designed to look like anything except what it is. Someone put him on payroll," she said. "Someone put 3 people on payroll." He turned one of the photographs face down. "I've been building this operation for 12 years, and I thought I knew every element of it. I didn't know this." She looked at him. There was no self-pity in how he said it, but there was no distance from it either. He was being honest with her in a way that cost something, and she understood that the cost was why he was being honest, because the situation required it, and he was, above all else, but a man who paid what situations required. "The network is not inside your organization alone," she said. "It spans. The targets I've documented, they're across sectors, government, property, criminal. My brother doesn't fit the same profile as the others. He was investigating." "Investigating what?" "He wouldn't tell me specifics, but he sent me a photograph of you." She held his gaze. "And photographs of 2 other men. 1 Korean, 1 Nigerian. I've identified the Korean one. He's a deputy minister of finance. I haven't been able to identify the Nigerian." Seo-jun was very still. "My photograph. Taken from a distance, public setting. But the timing of when he sent it, cross-referenced with what I know about the network's pattern. I think he was building a map, and connecting nodes. And now you're building it for him. Now I'm building it with more information than he had," she said. "And with access he didn't have." He turned another photograph face down. "You're going to need to be in places you've never been. I've been invisible in rooms that didn't know I was watching for 2 years. Tell me where." Something passed across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite respect, but a compound of both that settled into a specific steadiness. He looked at her in a way that felt, for the first time, like the looking went both directions. "Start with my attorney," he said. "He comes to the office Thursday at noon. He's been my attorney for 8 years, and I would have said last week that he was beyond question. Now I'm not sure, and I need to know who he's spoken to outside of official channels in the last 60 days. How do I get in the room? I'll tell them you're working on a translation contract. Your Korean is good enough." "My Korean is better than good enough." "I know," he said. And this time the ghost of the smile was clear enough to see. The attorney's name was Lim Dong-hyun, and he arrived at noon exactly as predicted, which was itself a kind of tell. Punctuality as performance, the careful presentation of someone who wanted to be read as reliable. Gabriella had been in the office since 10, reviewing documents in a corner of the room designated for the translation work that was her cover. She had been given a stack of contracts that required rendering from Korean into English, which she could do, though she did it slowly enough to still be there when Lim arrived, and did it well enough to not raise questions. She listened to the meeting from the next room with a small device that she had been shown how to operate by one of Seo-jun's people. A woman named Yejin, who had looked her over once with flat assessment, and then apparently decided she was acceptable, handing over the device with instructions delivered in the clipped, efficient tone of someone who did not invest in people until they had proved worth investing in. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. It was, on its surface, procedural. But Lim Dong-hyun made a phone call at the end that he thought was private. He stepped into the private bathroom and called someone. He spoke in a careful, low voice. Gabriella caught 4 words before the tap ran. Not yet. And Thursday. She wrote both in her notebook. When Seo-jun debriefed her that evening, she gave him the 4 words, and he sat with them for a long time. Not yet, he said. He's confirming something is being delayed, she said. Or confirming that a planned action hasn't happened. If the action is what I think it is. Thursday, he said. That's 4 days. And that's when you usually travel to the coast, she said. He looked at her sharply. She had said it without inflection, without emphasis, and the sharpness in his look was not suspicion, but the particular alertness of a person who had just been reminded that they were being watched, and that this time the watcher was on their side. He had not told her about the coastal travel, or she had learned it from one of the documents she'd translated, a reference to a regular security review at a property on the eastern coast, scheduled quarterly. You read everything, he said. I was hired to translate it, she pointed out. You were hired to translate the contracts. I read everything in the room, she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the coastal property is where I conduct certain meetings that can't happen in Seoul. 2 of the people in those meetings are on your list. The air in the room shifted. Who else knows about Thursday? She said. Lim, my security coordinator. The 2 people I was meeting. He paused. And now, apparently, whoever Lim was calling from the bathroom. You can't go. I'm not going, he said. But whoever is watching needs to believe I am. He looked at her across the table, which means I need a reason to change my plans that isn't the real reason. She understood. You need to be seen doing something else. Something believable. Something public. Something that looks like a choice I would make independently. He leaned back slightly. Do you know why I came to that diner? The shift of subject caught her off balance for just a moment. No. I went there the first time, 8 months ago, because I was told it was discreet. I went back because it was the one place in Seoul that felt like it didn't know who I was. He said this without softness, without making it into more than it was. Just information. The service was unremarkable. The food was ordinary. But the woman who worked the overnight shift looked at every person in that room the same way, like they were all equally real. He paused. Oh, that was unusual. She looked at him. He was looking at the table, not at her. The moment had weight, and he had let it have weight, and then he was moving past it, picking up a pen, writing something on the corner of a document, as if the previous thing had not been said. I'll need you close to the attorney Thursday morning, he said, before the schedule would have me traveling. I'll be there, she said. She drove back to the building through the evening traffic and did not let herself think about what he had said until she was alone with it, which she was, briefly, at a red light on a street she'd driven 50 times before. And then she let herself think about it. What it was, what it meant, what kind of man said a thing like that, and then immediately picked up a pen. And then she stopped thinking about it. She filed it. No, she put it in its place. She had work to do. The days between then and Thursday were not quiet ones. She met 6 of Seo-jun's inner circle, and assessed each with the same care she gave every room she moved through. His security coordinator, a man named Park Jun-hyuk, had the slightly overcorrect posture of someone working hard to maintain a performance. She noted this. His chief of operations was a woman named Oh-sera, who looked at Gabriella with an interest that was not entirely professional, but was also not hostile. More the interest of someone encountering an unfamiliar variable and deciding how to categorize it. She noted this too. She spent time with Yejin, who had thawed slightly, enough to share coffee with her and explain, in the particular shorthand of people who did practical work in unpractical circumstances, or the geography of the organization's daily movements. This was useful. More than useful. She also spent time alone with her notebook, building the map Marcus had started. She had the deputy finance minister, Kim Jae-won, she'd confirmed his name, as a node in the network. She had the unnamed Nigerian. She had Lim, the attorney, as a recent addition. She had the driver, now reassigned to other duties while the investigation was quiet. She had the man in the wrong apron at the diner, who had not been identified yet. She drew lines. She erased them. She redrew them differently. The network was not hierarchical. It was lateral, which was what made it hard to find. No center. No single authority. A mesh of relationships and arrangements that could lose any single node and still function. Except, she was staring at the notebook on Wednesday evening when she saw it. The timing of the disappearances mapped against the network's known meetings. There was a coordination pattern. Not random, not opportunistic. Every disappearance had been preceded by a specific meeting configuration. A cluster of 3 nodes activating within the same 72-hour window. She had 3 of those nodes active right now. The attorney, the driver, the man at the diner. She went to find Seo-jun. He was in the room he used late at night when the rest of the building had quieted down. She had learned, over 4 days, that he slept less than was healthy and spent the late hours reviewing things that were better reviewed in quiet. The door was open. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. She laid the notebook on the table without preamble. "Look at this." He looked. She walked him through the pattern, the 72-hour window, the node configuration, the precedent in 6 prior disappearances. He was very still when she finished. "You think we're already inside the window?" "I think we've been inside it since Lim's phone call 2 days ago. Which means Thursday is already late," he said. He stood. "They're not waiting for my coastal travel. It's something else. Something with a different trigger." "What happened 2 days ago?" she said, "before Lim's call?" Something changed in their calculation. He looked at her across the table. Something passed between them. Not the thing she'd filed at the red light, something more functional, the quick exchange of people who had gotten good at thinking together. "I accepted a meeting," he said slowly. "For Thursday afternoon, with the deputy finance minister." She stared at him. "Kim Jae-won." He reached out through a third party. Wanted to discuss, he said, a joint investment opportunity. His jaw tightened. "I accepted because there's been something I've been trying to confirm about him for months, and I thought it was finally an opening." "The meeting is not what he said it was," she said. "No. He's one of the nodes. The meeting itself is the trigger." She looked at the notebook, then back at him. "He's bringing you to them." The silence that followed was the kind that had weight in it. She went back to her room, and she sat with the shape of what they knew. 3 nodes active, a meeting scheduled, a timeline compressed. And somewhere in the architecture of the network, somewhere she hadn't been able to see yet, The unnamed Nigerian. The one Marcus had photographed. The one she couldn't place. She opened her phone and looked at the image Marcus had sent her. The Nigerian man. Mid-50s, well-dressed, photographed at what looked like a social function, taken from across a room, slightly blurred. She had looked at it hundreds of times and gotten nowhere. But she had not, until now, been able to compare it against the guest lists of the kinds of events that Seo-jun's world trafficked in. She had access to those lists now. She spent 4 hours going through them, cross-referencing, going back further, checking events across the previous 18 months. She found him at 12:40 a.m., a man named Emmanuel Osei, Ghanaian by origin, Nigerian resident for 12 years, currently listed as a senior director in an import-export firm that had 3 subsidiaries with clean registrations, and 1 subsidiary that, when you followed its registration papers back through 3 jurisdictions, dissolved into a company whose only identifiable asset was a private communications network operating out of a server room registered to a building in Yongsan-gu. She knew that building. It was 4 streets from the diner. She wrote down his name, wrote down the building, looked at what she had, and then she sat with a choice that felt like it might be the most important thing she'd decided in 2 years. She could take this to Seo-jun now, tonight. He would move on it. He had the resources, the reach. He could go at the building directly, or at Osei, and the network would fracture or scatter or go quiet, and maybe that would be enough. Maybe the pressure would surface something about Marcus, or she could go herself. She had something no one in Seo-jun's organization had: complete invisibility. They had no reason to know who she was. She was a diner server. She was foreign. She was, to the network, irrelevant. She could get inside that building. She had been inside harder rooms than that. She could get to a server room and get copies of what was on it and bring back proof that would make everything she'd told Seo-jun undeniable. Not circumstantial, not notebook level, but the kind of evidence you could hand to someone with institutional power and watch them not be able to look away. She could do that. She had the skills. She had the location, and she was halfway out of her chair before she stopped. She sat back down, put the notebook on the table, looked at it. She thought about Marcus, about the voice message he'd left her the day before he disappeared. Not about danger, not about the network, but about the restaurant near his apartment that made jollof rice that tasted almost, but not quite like their mother's, and how he'd been going there every Thursday, and how the small consistency of it made the city feel less like temporary. He had sounded fine. He had sounded like himself. And then the next day he was gone. She had been alone with this for 7 months. She had been carrying it alone, and she was good at carrying things alone, but she had gotten good at it because she'd had no other choice, and now there was a different choice available. And she was sitting here in the dark, considering not taking it, because what? Because she didn't trust him. She examined that, turned it over. He had given her no reason to distrust him. He had listened. He had acted. He had been honest with her, cost and all, in ways she hadn't expected and had not asked for. He had said, in the bare, plain words of a man who chose his words precisely, "You looked at every person in that room like they were equally real." She picked up the notebook and went to find him. He was still awake. She knocked. He said, "Come in." She put the notebook on the table and told him about Emmanuel Osei and the building in Yongsan-gu and her plan. She laid it out fully, the access she had, the logic of using her invisibility, what she thought she could retrieve. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You were going to go alone." It wasn't an accusation. It was just an observation with a specific quality to it. "I considered it," she said. "Why didn't you?" "Because I thought about what I was fighting for, and I decided that getting it right mattered more than getting there first." He looked at her for a moment, long enough that the looking had its own texture. "You go in tomorrow evening," he said. "Before Thursday. I'll have Yejin with you. She knows that building. We've had cause to watch it before. Yejin doesn't know she's coming yet." "She'll come," he said. "She won't like it, but she'll come." Gabriella nodded. She picked up the notebook, started for the door. "Gabriella." She turned. He was looking at her from across the room, arms folded. Of the low lamp behind him, making the scene something from a painting neither of them would name out loud. "Be careful," he said, as if the words surprised even him slightly. She looked at him, at the specific way he was standing, which was the way he stood when something cost him. "I will," she said. She left before either of them could say anything else. But on the other side of the door, she stood still for a moment and pressed her palm flat against the wall and let herself feel the weight of the last 5 days, the accumulation of it, the strange, compressed intimacy of being trusted, of trusting, of working alongside someone whose empire had nothing in common with her life except the precise shape of their vigilance. And she breathed once, deeply. Then she straightened, moved down the hallway. There was work to do. The building in Yongsan-gu was a 6-story commercial property that leased office space to 11 businesses. Emmanuel Osei's subsidiary was listed as an import management consultancy on the 4th floor. The server room was in the basement. This was not listed anywhere, which was itself information. Yejin had indeed not liked the plan but had come. She was compact and watchful, and had told Gabriella in the car on the way that she didn't do this kind of thing, and that she was only here because Seo-jun had asked, and that she expected complete communication. "Agreed," Gabriella had said. "No heroics," Yejin added. "No heroics," Gabriella confirmed. They went in as cleaning service contractors. This was Yejin's idea, delivered with the flat efficiency of someone who had solved entry problems before. The building used an external cleaning company that came in Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Yejin knew someone who knew someone. The details of the arrangement were in place before they got in the car. They were on the 4th floor at 6:40 p.m. with cart and equipment and the unremarkable presence of people doing a job that no one watched. The office for Osei's subsidiary was locked. Yejin opened it in 40 seconds with tools she had not explained. Inside was ordinary on the surface: desks, monitors, filing cabinets. Gabriella went to the desks. Yejin watched the corridor. She found what she needed in the 3rd desk, a printed document that turned out to be an operational ledger, coded in a way that was clearly designed for internal use only. Names rendered as numbers, destinations rendered as grid coordinates, but payment records partially in clear text, and the payment records included account numbers. She photographed every page. 17 photographs. Her hands were steady. At the bottom of the stack of documents, tucked inside a manila folder with no label, she found a list. It was 11 names. She ran her eyes down it and stopped at the 5th. Marcus Adeyemi, her brother's name, and next to it, handwritten in a different ink, a single character that she recognized from Korean bureaucratic shorthand. Held. Not gone. Not eliminated. Held. Her throat closed completely. She stood with the paper in her hand and the character swimming slightly in her vision, and she breathed through it. Breathed through the specific, enormous relief of it, which was also the terror of it. and because held meant somewhere, and somewhere meant they might move him, and— "We need to go," Yejin said from the doorway. Her voice had a different quality than it had had a moment before. Gabriella photographed the list, put it back in the folder, put the folder back in the stack. They walked out. You know what comes next is the part that decides everything. Before we get there, if this story has had you from the beginning, subscribe right now. Like this video. Drop a comment telling us, did you see this coming? Because we're about to find out if all of it was enough. In the car, Gabriella kept her face still and told Yejin about Marcus. Yejin listened, said nothing for a moment. Then, "We tell him tonight." "Yes," Gabriella said. "All of it. All of it." When they arrived back at the building, Seo-jun was in the operations room with Park Jun-hyuk and two others she didn't know. She waited in the doorway until Yejin caught his eye, and he excused himself and came to them. She showed him the photographs on her phone, all 17 pages of the ledger, and then the list. He looked at the list for a long time. His expression did not change, but something behind it did, something that was about more than operational calculation. "Marcus is on a held list," he said. "Yes." "Which means the network doesn't eliminate everything it takes. Some of what it holds, it uses. Leverage," she said, "or information, or both." He looked at the other names on the list. She watched him recognize at least two of them. "These people are still alive," he said. It was not a question. "And somewhere accessible," she said. "Because if we can pressure the network through the evidence we have from the ledger, we can force a location." "Thursday is tomorrow," he said, "which is why we need to move tonight." He was already turning toward Park Jun-hyuk, the decision made before she'd finished the sentence, not because he wasn't listening, but because he'd been listening so well that he'd gotten to the conclusion before the words arrived. This was the thing about him that she had stopped trying not to notice. He was fast in a way that was clean, not reckless, not impatient, but genuinely quick in the processing, the kind of mind that could hold several running calculations simultaneously and still give each one proper weight. She had worked alongside people who were competent. She had not, until now, worked alongside someone where the competence was so exactly matched to the situation that it felt almost like recognition. She stopped. She was standing in the hallway with her phone still in her hand, and her brother was alive somewhere, and the network was about to be put under pressure, and Kang Seo-jun was doing what he did, which was moving precisely through a crisis as though the crisis had been prepared for. And she felt, for the first time in 7 months, something that was not exactly relief and not exactly safety, but was adjacent to both. She put the phone in her pocket, went to the operations room. There was work to do. The operation Seo-jun ran that night was quiet in the way a thunderstorm is quiet before it breaks. He moved on 3 points simultaneously. The building in Yongsan-gu. It was where a technical team extracted the server data before dawn. The attorney Lim, who was contacted at 2 a.m. by someone Seo-jun trusted completely, a woman who had known Lim for 15 years and was owed enough to make the call, and who, confronted with specific evidence in specific language, told everything he knew in under 40 minutes. And the driver, who had already been contained, and who, presented with the evidence from the ledger, identified the contact point for the network's coordination. The contact point was Emmanuel Osei. And Osei was when Park Jun-hyuk and his team arrived at his apartment at 4 in the morning, in the process of making an exit. He did not complete the exit. Gabriella was not present for any of this. She was at the building, in the operations room, monitoring the feeds and the communications with Yejin, or who had thawed completely by now and sat beside her with coffee, and the particular focus of someone who had decided, sometime in the last 12 hours, that this was a partnership worth operating in. At 4:47 a.m., Park Jun-hyuk sent a single message. Secured. Yejin read it first, glanced at Gabriella. "That's Osei," she said. Gabriella nodded. Her hands were very still in her lap. Then, at 5:23 a.m., a different message from a different number. Seo-jun's private line to Yejin. Location confirmed, initiating retrieval. Yejin read it, paused, then turned the phone toward Gabriella. Gabriella read it again. The specific warmth that moved through her was not hysterical and not performed, and she did not try to contain it. She let it be what it was, which was real, which was the first truly real thing she'd felt since the morning she'd woken up and understood that Marcus had not come home. "Okay," she said after a moment. "Yeah," Yejin said. Marcus was retrieved from a managed property in Gyeonggi Province at 6:15 a.m. He was dehydrated and had lost weight, and had a particular look that she recognized from reading about people who'd spent a long time not knowing whether anyone was looking for them. The specific combination of hope kept deliberately small, so it wouldn't hurt as much when it was wrong. She was there when the car arrived. She had not asked to be there. Seo-jun had told her to be there, had said it simply, without ceremony. 3 words. "You should go." As if it were obvious, as if there was no other configuration of events in which this ended differently. While Marcus saw her and stopped walking, she crossed the space between them in 6 steps. She was not someone who performed emotion. She had been trained by circumstances and by herself not to let the inside become visible as performance. But there were things that bypassed training entirely, and this was one of them. She held on to her brother in a car park in Gyeonggi Province at dawn with the cold air of a Korean autumn sitting on everything, and she let it be real. And it was. And it was enough. He said into her shoulder, "I knew you were looking. I never stopped," she said. "I know." A breath. "I knew you'd find the pattern. You left me enough. I tried not to leave you. Too much." He pulled back enough to look at her. His face was exhausted and known, and their father's eyes in her brother's face. "Who else is here?" "That's a longer conversation," she said. "Come on." The longer conversation took most of the day. Marcus debriefed with Seo-jun's team. He gave them everything. The 7 months he'd spent building the map of the network, the additional nodes she hadn't known about, the names of people in Seoul's finance ministry who had been routing information to OC's operation for 3 years. His captivity had not been idle. He had listened, and Marcus had always been a brilliant listener, and what he had to give them was the last few pieces of the structure she'd been building without. With his information and hers combined, the map was complete. The Deputy Finance Minister, Kim Jae-won, facing the specific evidence that OSE had surrendered and that the server data corroborated, did not wait to be approached. He reached out through an intermediary within 12 hours and agreed to cooperate with a discreet investigation that would, Seo-jun's people indicated, go a great deal better for Kim if he was on the right side of it. The meeting on Thursday never happened. Thursday came, and the coastal property sat empty, and the trap that had been set for Kang Seo-jun closed on air. 3 weeks after that Thursday, on a quiet Wednesday evening, she was back in the diner. She had requested her job back. The manager, a practical woman named Jung Hye-sun, had not asked too many questions about the extended absence. People disappeared from overnight service work fairly regularly, and Gabriella had been reliable for 2 years, and reliability was harder to find than explanations. She was back on the schedule within a week. The diner at a night was the same. What, the light was the same? The particular smell of the kitchen at 2 a.m. was the same. She moved through the shift with the same efficiency she always had, but something in the room had changed. Not the room, her. The months of careful containment, the notebook in her inner pocket, the watching and recording and managing the knowledge of danger alone, all of that had resolved into something different. Not rest, exactly, but the specific quality of attention that had been earned and released. She was wiping down a table near the window at 1:50 a.m. when she heard the door. She did not look up immediately. She finished the table, folded the cloth, then looked. He was standing in the entrance. Alone. His security was outside, the way they'd been last time, the way they were every time he came somewhere he actually wanted to be. He was wearing the same kind of jacket he'd been wearing the night she'd spilled water on him. His face was the same, precise, slightly tired, carrying the specific private weight of a man who ran things and rarely had the option of putting them down. He looked around the room, found her. She looked back at him across the diner floor. The room was half full with the ordinary midnight population, the insomniacs, the late workers, the people who needed company without conversation. No one was paying attention to either of them. No one was receiving suspicious phone calls. No one was watching from a car across the street. He walked toward a table near the window. She let him sit, gave it a beat. Then she picked up a menu she didn't need to carry and walked to his table and set it down and said, in Korean that carried, as always, at almost no accent, "What can I get you?" He looked up at her. The specific thing in his eyes when he looked at her was not the first time it had been there, and this time there was no operational reason to postpone what it was. She felt it register in her chest with the clean, particular weight of something that had been there for weeks and had been patient. "Tea," he said. "Whatever you have." "We have the same tea we've always had," she said. "I know." A pause. "That's why I came back." She looked at him for a moment. He looked at her. The room moved quietly around them, the way it always had. The midnight indifference of the world, the equalization of it, the thing he'd said weeks ago about being looked at like she was real. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She went back behind the counter and made tea and brought it to his table and placed it in front of him with the care of something that cost nothing and meant everything. And when she straightened, he was looking at her the way she'd learned he looked when he was being completely honest. "Stay," he said. Just that word. Held out between them like something he was offering with both hands, and she pulled out the other chair and sat. The notebook was still in her inner pocket. It always would be. That was the nature of who she was, the watching, the recording, the understanding that rooms held more than most people looked for. It was not something she'd needed to become. It was simply what she'd always been, sharpened by circumstance, proven necessary, or finally given enough space and weight and alliance to matter the way it was always capable of mattering. Marcus was in Seoul. He had taken a week and then started working again, because that was also the nature of who they were. The children of people who had survived too many things to believe in extended pause. He was working with a journalist he trusted, building the documentation into something that would eventually surface through channels that couldn't be buried. It would take time. It would require care. But it would happen. The network had fractured. The nodes that could be pressured had been. The ones that couldn't had gone quiet, which was not the same as gone, but was the beginning of it. Seo-jun drank his tea. She sat across from him in the diner where she had spilled water on his jacket and changed both of their trajectories. And outside the window, Soul was doing what soul always did at this hour, burning with light, going about its business, keeping its millions of secrets in the ordinary darkness of a city that never fully slept. She was not afraid of the dark. She had never been afraid of the dark. What she'd been afraid of, she understood now, was not being believed when she said what she saw in it. That was over. He set down the teacup, looked at her. "You're thinking," he said. "I'm always thinking." "I know." And there it was again, that small, specific thing in his voice when he said, "I know about her," the particular weight of someone who had paid attention and was no longer trying to keep it to himself. "What about?" "The fact that I spilled water on an extremely expensive jacket," she said, and it turned out to be the most useful thing I'd done in 2 years. He looked down at the jacket. "It dried fine." "I know it did. I watched you check it." He looked up at her. "You watch everything." "Everything that matters," she said. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the diner was warm and ordinary, and full of the quiet that was just quiet, not the kind that preceded disappearance. She had learned the difference, and she would always know it now, the way you always knew the difference between the sounds of a house at peace and a house about to break. This was the sound of peace. She reached across the table, not dramatically, not with announcement. Just her hand, placed near enough to his that the question it asked was quiet and complete. He looked at it for a moment. Then he turned his hand over. And that was that. Now she had been looking at everyone in this room the same way for 2 years, like they were all equally real, like their presence deserved the full weight of her attention. It had kept her invisible. It had kept her moving. It had, on one specific night in October, kept a man alive who was now sitting across from her in the same chair, drinking the same tea, in the same diner where the story had stopped being only hers. The door opened, and a new customer came in from the cold, pulling off a scarf, looking around for a seat. Gabriella glanced up, assessed the room the way she always did, found nothing of concern. Turned back. The look on his face when she turned back was brief, unguarded, almost private, the expression of a man who was not used to being waited for, and had not known until this moment how much it could matter. While she had seen him without his armor, she had seen it the morning after the diner, in the low lamp, with the photograph spread before him, and the tiredness in his shoulders, and the private weight of a man who ran an empire, and could not, in that moment, put it down alone. She had been the room he could not perform in. She had not known then what to do with that. She knew now. "Drink your tea," she said. "It gets cold fast." He reached for the cup. The corner of his mouth moved in the specific way it moved when something was genuinely funny to him. "Yes," he said. "It does." If this story reached you, if Gabriella's patience, her love for her brother, and the particular courage of someone who chose to stay in the hard room when the easy door was open, moved you in any way, then you already know what to do. Like this video. Leave a comment. Or tell us which moment you couldn't stop watching. And subscribe so you're here the next time someone walks through that diner door with a secret the room isn't ready for. Every story on this channel was made for the ones who stay up too late, who feel too much, who know that the most dangerous power is the kind that happens in silence. Stay with us. There's more coming.